Hey, welcome to Black Hole Woodworking. My name's Matt. Today I'm going to show you how I made this floating desk out of 4 2x4s. It's also got a natural stain and a homemade finish. It was a pretty easy build, so check it out. Hope you enjoy. The first thing I did was to cut the lumber down to size. I'm fully aware that I'm using construction grade lumber for this project. Two of these 2x4s had close to 30 staples in them. The other two thankfully didn't have any. Now that I can cut these down, I'm using about 78 inches or 2180 millimeters to make the actual top itself. The remaining smaller pieces are going to be used to support the table to make it float on the walls. My original plan to get these things cut in half was to use the bandsaw. This took a lot longer than I was expecting, and while I got through this thing, it wasn't a hard decision to switch over to the table saw. It's just so much faster, even though you cut out more material. The reason I wanted to use the bandsaw was to make it a little bit thicker than I ended up having, but it worked out. I decided to skip the jointer first and go to the planer to remove some of the marks from the table saw. Here I'm just squaring up the edges, getting ready for glue up, and you don't have to use a jointer or a planer. Really, if you got a good edge on your table saw, you could probably glue it up from that and then sand it afterward instead of using a planer. For me, I have the tools, so it's just much faster for me to do it that way. And here I'm just squaring up that last edge before we get to the glue up. Fortunately for me, my wife had just cleared off the island and it was a perfect spot for me to start gluing up our boards. Thanks, honey. I glued up enough pieces that would fit through my planer, so there's really two larger parts to this top on the table now. So as you can see, these fit through the planer nicely. I ended up having to take off a little more thickness than I wanted, but I wanted to have a flat top, so I made it work. These pieces are getting ready to be glued up again, and I'm just marking them so when I run them through the jointer I don't get them mixed up. When I joint the boards, I use an in and out method, so one edge the face is facing out and the other adjoining piece the face is in. That way when I put them together, any kind of angles that I got wrong, let's say my fence on my jointer is out, those angles get cancelled out because those pieces were run the opposite of each other, so they mate nicely. When I came back inside, I had found that the island had yet again been cleaned off for me. So I took advantage of that and did another glue up on it. It must be my lucky day. This part of the glue up went pretty well. The biggest thing for me was to keep all these three pieces aligned because I don't have something that I can stick in the middle to help make that work. I'm using my homemade track saw to square up one end of the desktop. On the other end, you can tell that's a pretty big angle and that corner just isn't square, so that's just what it is. Time for a little wooden crack spackle. It's a nice way to fill the little holes and little gaps that are left from the glue up, if there are any. Some of this is just because it's spruce or pine and it just had some checks or something in the wood. Once again, I found myself needing a large countertop to use to make this glue up work. I put the face on the tabletop and it worked out pretty good. Here I'm pretending to give it a chamfer because I forgot to film that part for real. That's why there's no sawdust flying anywhere. And this will help with putting your arm on the desk. It'll just be a lot more comfortable for us. Here I'm prepping the wood that will actually support the top and make it float. So I'm just using the cutoffs from the 2x4s that I started with, making them nice and square, and then I'm gonna end up cutting them in half as well because I just don't need a full 2x4 to hang them on. and it's also going to be too thick if I do that. These are those support pieces I was talking about. They are now going to be at their final width. The finishing process for this particular top is something that I do a lot. I dip usually paper towel into a little bowl of boiled linseed oil, and then I end up dipping it into some ash. And the ash that you're seeing is the ash that comes out of our pellet stove. So it's basically the leftover stuff in there that we would normally throw into the garden, something like that. Basically I use that to stain the wood, and it comes out with this really nice color that we like, and for us it fits in our house really well. So that's the stain of choice for this project. Usually when I start doing something like this, I end up having a whole bunch of little helpers. These little helpers are what make projects like this so much fun. Just watching them learn and just try stuff. They actually did a really good job. They ended up doing most of the staining on this piece. These are the pieces that I've mounted to the wall, anchoring them to the studs, and the desktop will rest on them. And this is what it looks like when it's fully installed. If you liked the video, please hit that like button, and if I've earned your subscription today, please hit that subscribe button and ring that little bell. That way you'll get notified every time I put out a new video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.